What the fuck is up with Kanga? That is the title of our last episode, and I think it is still the question on everybody's minds. Welcome to this week's episode of That LCO Show. I'm joined, as always, by Calvin.
Hello, and here with me is the ever so handsome Maximize. So,
Thank you, Calvin.
yeah, Max. I mean, I guess this week, like, it's a little better in terms of WTF is up with Kanga, right? You have the Kanga versus Peace series that kicked off the LCO Super Week. That made people go, WTF is up with Kanga in a positive way.
And that's what
right?
I mean. I think when I say what the fuck is up with Kanga, it's not all bad. It's like what is this team? Is this team good? Is this team bad? Because simultaneously they beat the only undefeated team in the league, and then they had the quickest game in the history of the LCO the next day. Like, I don't know what is going on with this team. But anyway, this week we saw our first Super Week. 3 days of games happening. Essentially every day there was some really, really good games and some really close games. Also, if you guys have noticed, we're doing a bit of a scuffed setup. If you guys are watching on YouTube, because my internet has shit the bed, so this is how we're gonna have to film and do everything this
just
week.
for this week. Just for this week.
But yeah, let's talk a bit about Kanga, because obviously they had the game against Peace where Chungi got his Ari. And we all know what happens when Chungi gets Ari, especially on this patch. Like, we literally talked about it on last week's episode. We said, Ari's reworked, Ari essentially buffed, right? Is he going to play it? And he does, and he absolutely pops off.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's not just us that says it, right? Like, I'm pretty sure many high elo player would just assume, okay, this guy is picking Ari. Even, I think the LCO broadcast mentioned that, alright, Ari is looking like she's in the meta, and it looks like the Chungi and Kyosei and maybe Kisei are going to play this champion, right? So, what kicked off the Super Week in Kanga versus Peace? Peace completely sort of disrespected Kanga, left up Ari, and drafted a very questionable comp, in my opinion, with that Riffin and Silas, and just got absolutely demolished by Chungi.
Yeah, I think it speaks a bit to like how Kanga is as a team, because you see Chungi gets all confident, gets all happy when he's playing his Ari, and you can sort of feel like that would sort of have an effect on the rest of the team, in that they see their mid laner getting solo kills. Like, he popped off that game. He was absolutely the MVP of that game for Kanga. Probably the best player that they've had in a game all split long, right? Like, he absolutely 1v9 that game.
Yeah.
And so you have to feel like that boost of confidence was something really, really good for Kanga. But then they lost in 18 minutes and 36 seconds to PGG. How do you have the fastest loss the day after you beat the best team in the league?
The thing is, right? I don't even remember there is a sub 20 game in probably like the last year of OPL or something. Like, it's been a while. It has been a while that we see a sub 20-minute game in competitive league in Australia or in Oceania.
In anywhere, right? It's so rare.
Yeah, and like doing it, right after beating the undefeated team the day before, it's just weird. Like, I couldn't understand it, because like, I think I even tweeted about it. Like, am I cursing Kanga or something? Because every time I thought Kanga's gonna win, they just lost, and they literally shat the bed, right? Like, last time I assumed that it's okay, guys, it's an easy 2-0 week for Kanga. They're against Mammoth, they're against Gravitas. That is a 0-2 week. And then I was like, okay, Kanga have momentum against Peace. They kind of figured out what's happening with this meta, what's happening with their team, and then it's an 1836
No, they
game.
didn't. They definitely did not figure anything out.
They definitely did not.
No. And what was so weird to me was the way they approached the draft too, right? Because you saw Belkan locking in the Diana, right? He has the Diana. You know for a fact that PGG, if given the opportunity, will pick Yasuo. You know 100% they're going to pick it. They've picked it in heaps of games. It's a really easy combo to perfect. And Kanga go, you know what? Fuck it. We're going to leave it up, and we're going to pick Riven. And Chungi's Ari compared to Chungi's Riven is a whole different ball game. I mean, he looked so clunky on that Riven. Like, it looked like he hadn't played a game of it in over a year. It was just not the play.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. Like, what the second half of what you said, I'm not really sure because you've been lagging a lot in Discord. But I do agree. Like, the thing is, they even banned Greg as second phase,
Hmm.
right? They banned Greg as second phase. That tells me that all right, guys, they are preparing for Diana Yasuo. Like, and Kanga, they know it very well. And something that tells me that, like, the fact that they banned Gragas and just completely leave up Yasuo. I was literally co-streaming that day, and I was assuming that maybe, just maybe, Kanga had a plan to just sneak Yasuo before Pentanet does. Right?
Yeah.
I was expecting a Yasuo 4P,
Yeah.
but no, it's a Lee Sin. And I was so puzzled because all of a sudden you have Lee Sin and Gwen, which is like, all right, so you're gonna have Gwen top lane, you're gonna have Lee Sin jungle,
No.
and what are you going to play mid lane?
Yeah.
Right? What's worse is it's not a Lee Sin jungle. It's not a Gwen top lane. It's a freaking
It's
Lee
horrible.
Sin top lane
It's
and
so
Gwen
bad.
jungle. And my god.
Set into Lee Sin, right? But this is after Lee Sin has been essentially removed from being a solo lane champion. Set is still a top laner, right? Set hasn't been transitioned to any other role, but they've deliberately nerfed lane Lee Sin. Gwen has always had a good matchup into Set. The matchup's always been fine. And how are you ever gonna win with a Gwen jungle? Like, I just don't get it, man.
The thing is, I mean, the thing is that in my opinion, right, Gwen jungle isn't necessarily bad. Like, the champion just needs setup, right?
Yeah, no,
But Lee Sin doesn't offer setup, and Riven doesn't offer setup.
I agree. And
right?
The main issue I had was you have a Gwen Riven mid jungle. What is that going to accomplish? If you put in the Lee Sin, suddenly you have a Lee Sin Riven mid jungle. That's actually quite a scary duo for the Diana Yasuo to fight, right? Because they're both really strong duelers. They both have definite burst when they're level 6. But put that role swap, it made zero sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, like, you get a like winning matchup in mid lane, right? Riven and Yasuo, in theory, that's winning for Riven. At least in top lane, that is winning for Riven,
Yeah.
right? But you all of a sudden have a losing top lane and a jungler that needs setup and doesn't get any setup. So yeah, I mean, like, this sort of goes back to one of my tweet, like right after Super Week, where I said some teams really need to look at, their own draft or their gameplay, and some people deserve to get fired. And this is one of those drafts that I look at it and say, like, whoever prepped this draft, if it's even prepared, deserves to get fired.
Yeah, and
it just makes zero sense.
They had another one their draft versus Direwolves, where they had Graves mid into Syndra. Like, Syndra, I don't know what the jungler was for Kanga, but it's like Syndra into Karthus with no flash and Graves. Like, of course, Syndra is just going to absolutely run that mid jungle. Like, Graves has the worst time playing into Syndra because you outrange him, you can stun him whenever he tries to walk up for creeps, you have the easiest setup on him. I don't know. The whole way that they approach draft just needs to be really, really looked at because it's just not working. You're not picking good champions for the spot.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it just feels like they're picking champions that sort of can be flexed for the sake of flexing it.
Yeah, but they're not actually good into any of the positions you flex them in. It's like, oh exactly. Yeah, we picked Lee Sin, he can go top jungle. Oh wait, he loses the top matchup and he gets outscaled in the jungle matchup. Shit. What do we do?
And the thing is, like, usually you sort of just slip the losing matchup into like a sort of like a more mild position, right? Like in jungle, okay, Lee Sin does get outscaled, but Lee Sin can do work in the early game, right?
Yeah.
But Kanga, like, they consistently opt into the worst pick possible in the worst position, right? The cog more mid lane, right? And then you have the Graves, and then you have I don't know, just anything.
And then
Riven, yeah.
The Ahri was the good one. Ahri was the good one.
Ahri was a good one, yes. Ahri was a good one.
It's like if you throw enough darts at the dartboard, eventually one's gonna get a bullseye, right? All the others might go completely wide, but if you're gonna get that one bullseye. Anyway.
So enough bashing on Kanga.
Yeah, we're gonna
bashing on Kanga.
We're now going to bash
There's another game.
Go ahead.
There's another game that, I mean, it's probably not only me, but like a lot of people probably want to discuss, which is I would say it's the match of the week, and that is Chiefs versus Order.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of went very similar to how the last Order versus Chiefs game went, right? Like, we saw Order get a massive lead in the early game. I think Order had a really good approach to draft this game. I think their draft was really, really nice and really good adaptations to come out. But they just couldn't close out. And I think that's sort of a habit we're starting to see with Order, right? Is their early game and mid game is quite good, but come that late game decision making, they will just make the wrong call, and then once that happens, the game's just over. Like, it was literally just one bad call at the end of the game to try to end that cost them the entire game. So
Yeah.
I don't think this is too worrying a sign for Order, right? I think with a little bit of refinement, both of the games versus Chiefs would have been wins, and then it's a whole different talk in terms of the standings.
Yeah, but I mean, there are a few things that I would like to disagree because, like, for example, the Nessus pick, like, in theory, I know that Nessus does beat Trinomir, right? It's a decent neutralizing pick. If Trinomir player misplays, then there's actually a kill angle for Nessus, right? You run him down with Wither, you run him down with Flash and Exhaust. But the problem is, like, you pick Nessus as a counter to Trinomir, but you lost all 5 plays in first turn.
Yeah.
Now, that's not something that I would like to see if it's like a deliberate counter pick. And also, the fact that, Order consistently throws their late game, I think is a more worrying trend than people think. Sometimes you would write it off, right? All right, yeah, I mean, it's against against middle of the pack teams, against lower tier teams that would just close out the game. They're just gonna get one advantage. It's just gonna close out the game. It's game over. But the problem is, like, they're consistently losing these games against top teams, right? They lost against Pentanet, they lost against Peace, they lost against Chiefs, and at this stage, like, I mean, at what point do you stop calling them a top team if they keep throwing and if they keep doing the same thing?
Yeah, and
Right?
that sort of brings me to an important point. It's like, when you are one of those teams that is trying to play for the top, you need, like, especially in this next week, you need to be winning those games against top teams, right? If you're losing to all the other 3, I guess, sort of top teams that we have in the league, you're going to be in a really bad standing for playoffs, right? You're going to have all the head-to-heads you're going to be losing in, and you're going to come in the lower bracket. So if you are Order, you really need to make sure that, yes, it's fine to try stuff, it's fine to experiment with the new picks, but you need to make sure that coming into this sort of second round robin, you need to be winning against these top teams.
Yeah.
A bit more on that Nasus pick. I actually loved it. I actually really
Yeah, I like
the
it too.
Nasus pick.
Yeah.
I think it makes Trendomir's job in the game really hard. That being said, I think we still saw Topoon do absolutely everything he could in that game. Like you said, getting all those plates, diving bot lane, getting kills. He found Kisei on Corki twice. Got 2 solo kills there.
That literally gave me the Mammoth Pentanet flashbacks.
Yeah,
honestly.
it did. The Trendomir just fucking finding the Corki. But the way, like, I quite like the Nasus. It makes Trendomir, you just press W on him in every fight, and once you have it maxed, he's got a 99% slow. What the fuck is he doing? Like, he can't move, he can't attack. It makes it really hard to play. That being said, I don't think the Nasus contributed too much in the game. I think it was sort of left to sideline duty, which, to be fair, it is. The other traditional counter pick to the Trendomir is like a Jax or something. I know Biopanther is definitely a proficient Jax player. I would have loved to see, maybe them pick up the Jax and go for something more aggressive, right? Because then you don't have the situation where you're dropping plates, you're losing sideline prio. You pretty much always win that matchup as Jax.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, if all else fail, you still have Gragas. Right? I think Gragas might have been banned second phase that game. I don't remember.
Malphite was definitely banned.
Yeah, Malphite was definitely banned. But the thing is, like, if Gragas wasn't banned, like, Gragas is and has been a decent answer to Trinomir all this time.
Yeah.
Right? Body slam is always just going to, bump Trinomir, stopping him from taking turrets. And then you have the explosive cast. Even if you party cast, like, it still destroys minions, right? And Trinomir cannot split push into that.
Yeah, and the matchup, if you watch some of the LCK, I remember, I think it was Zeus, or Zeus, rather, versus some Trendomir. And, like, he's, like, 100 CS down, but as soon as he gets 2 to 3 items, he just stands at the turret and he just beats the shit out of Trendomir. Like, he out-trades him every single time. Just WE auto with your grasp, and it's impossible to play for the Trendomir, right? So there are a lot of picks available that you can just pick to, like, I guess, stonewall the Trendomir. But, yeah, I would have loved to see them go, you know what? You've blind picked Trendomir. We're going to pick something to, like, skill check that. Like a Fiora or a Jax or something like that are always, like, really good answers.
Now, at the same time, though, I mean, we sort of said a lot of bad things about Order, right? You know, the way that they sort of play the game incorrectly, they throw the games, etc. But one good thing that I still want to highlight is the fact that Order is still beating Chiefs in the early game, and this also speaks how badly Chiefs need to improve the early game, right? Like Tally is consistently getting gapped early game in lane, and then you have Arthur still randomly dying. Draco has shown a lot of hesitant in terms of engage. Ray's like messed up a few engages as well this week.
Yeah, I'm done talking about Arthur. I've had enough. I don't think I don't think he has made drastic improvements this week. I just want to stop ragging on it. He's still not looking. There will be a week. Okay, I'm hoping that there will be a week that we can come on and say, Arthur, you've proven us wrong.
God.
You are the LCK jungler that played with Chovy. Yes, you are dominating everyone, but until this point, not happening. Kevy gapped you this game. Kevy played really well. Kevy played a better Lee Sin than you did, and he only was Lee Sin for about 30 seconds that entire game. So
that's true. That is true.
Anyway, I definitely, to your point, I definitely don't think that what we're saying is a criticism of Order. I think it's more about their late game closing out. Like the early game, like I said, if you fix a couple things there, the game's won. Right? You go to Ocean Soul instead of trying to end the game. You get Ocean Soul. Next fight, you win the game. Right? So it's not that Order's playing bad at all, and I think that their record paints them at a worse picture than they actually are. Right? It's one of those teams where if you look at their record, you see they're 5-4. They're definitely better than a 5-4 team. Right? So definitely don't discount the boys before playoffs. Another team that's sort of back to expectation, I guess a little bit, is Mammoth. Right?
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, like this Super Week has shown a lot of teams sort of back in their true form, right?
Yeah.
I think Mammoth is like the most obvious one. Again, you know, my tweet. There are some teams that just have this glaring weakness. Oh. That was scary.
It's okay. If you hear that door slam, it frightens the shit out of me because the wind just takes it and just slams it against the wall.
Okay.
Anyway.
It's okay. It's 8 in the morning, not 8 p.m. So it's not as scary as it would be at night. But but like what is scary is Mammoth, right? Like you look at their gameplay and you start to wonder. Yeah, not in a good way. Not in a good way. Like you look at the gameplay and you will start thinking, what if Mammoth would start losing all the games in the second round robin, which seems plausible, right? Like the way they played against Order, the way they played against Peace, the way they played against Chiefs. Yes, granted, strength of schedule, you know, it's not to their favor. They played against three of probably the best teams in the league, but they're not showing like good signs. I guess they had like a decent game against Chiefs, but like that also again like highlights Chiefs' poor early game.
Yeah.
I mean, what is wrong with Mammoth?
I don't know. I think they're a team that very much relies on one of the players getting really, really ahead and then them snowballing off that, right? I think if they have to play the game in a standard fashion and they don't have, you know, this insanely fed Trendemir getting solo kills on the sideline every 2 minutes, they don't really know how to play the game. And that's just because, like, they're rookies, right? Like, you look at the experience of this team, they're all literally first split in, right? First split in a professional league, compared to a team like Chiefs, which, I don't know, there was a statistic on the broadcast which said they had, like, 30 plus years of competitive experience on that one team, which I was just like, dude, what the fuck?
Wait, really?
Well, I mean, Tally's been playing forever, right?
Wow.
Race has been playing for ages
Ray's been playing
too.
forever. Yeah.
Draku's the last 3 or 4 years. I don't know how long Mira and Top Boon have been playing for, but I don't know. I don't know if they included coaching staff. It might have included like Babip and Kuden. Right? But even then, that's still an insane amount of experience. So
that is actually a lot. Wow.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing with Mammoth is, look, they're better than people expected still. Like, they're not getting absolutely shit stomped every game like they did last year. They had a decent game against Chiefs with the Viego just proving that OS is the best region to pick Viego in because someone will always die and you'll always get a reset, to quote Calvin.
Yes.
But I definitely don't think they're like, at the start of the split, that was definitely a overperformance from them.
Yeah. I mean, definitely call me all you want, because the thing is, like, Viego had a negative win rate across the board in every other region except for Oceania, where the champion, at the beginning of this Super Week, had a 75% win rate.
Yeah.
Like, come on, a 75% win rate. And I believe it's not even, like, you know, 4 games or something. Like, the champion was picked quite often.
Yeah.
In this league, and having a whopping 75% win rate just speaks so much. Like reset champions, pick reset champions in LCO, and you will actually get resets.
Yep. Exactly. Okay, so I guess the other good game that we had this week that I want to talk about a bit is Peace vs PGG. Now, this was PGG coming off sort of a hot streak, having defeated Order. People were sort of questioning, like, have PGG sort of elevated their performance? And then they picked the worst draft I think we've ever seen. Like, there's literally the only CC they have on this team comp are Yuumi ult, Jinx E, and Irelia E. That's literally the only forms of hard to see they have. And you compare that to the Peace mid-jungle duo of Ryze Xin which is like I love playing with that team comp because it's so easy. EW, Xin W, it's a kill, right? And Lisa, oh my god. Lisa just absolutely gapped Belka in this game.
That was a gap. Yeah, that was a massive gap. And again, referring back to my tweet, this draft, if I look at it right, I'm just gonna say, like, whoever prepared this draft deserves to get fired. Like, although LCO is not extremely high standard in terms of, competitive play globally, this is still competitive play. Like, you're not picking Graves, Gwen, and Irelia in a competitive game. Like, this is not solo queue, where you get solo bolos that left, right, and center.
That's exactly what I was gonna say about this draft. It feels like it's a draft in solo queue where everyone's like, okay, I'm gonna pick a counter for my lane. And then you look at the whole comp, and you're like,
it just doesn't
wow,
make sense.
this is awful. Because you got the Yuumi into Tahm Kench, right? In isolation, that's great. Yuumi outscales. Oh, then we have Irelia into Ryze. Irelia wins the 1v1, but has a really hard time in the early game. And in terms of mid-jungle fights, she can just get one shot, right? Yeah. And then Graves into Jace isn't even that good. It's losing for Graves, right? Jace does get the push. With Hullbreaker, obviously, it turns a bit back to Graves, but it's an even matchup at best. So, I don't know. Drafting no hard CC just makes the game so hard for yourself to play.
Yeah, I just honestly don't understand, what is happening with LCO so far. Like, there's just some atrocious draft happening this split. And it's not like, a once or twice where, okay, it's just an off day, we can write it off. We've been seeing a lot of these drafts lately.
Yeah. I mean, I think Peace Midlord said it in his draft. He said we have a much better draft, right? Yes. I think that was the only thing that he said in his interview. But like, this draft is so good from Peace, and this is one of the drafts that I absolutely love. I think you've got Cheon and Aphelios, very comfortable champion. Aphelios Jinx are obviously like the 280s that run the meta, right? And just having that mid jungle of Xin Ryze makes the game so easy to play. And for teams in OS, I was talking about this a bit when I was co-streaming the other day, but making the game as easy for yourself to play as possible is the best thing to do in OS, right? Because the more room for error you have, the harder the game's going to be. But this game, it's so simple. All Ryze does, push the wave, move with Xin you can kill any side lane, right? It's a very simple, very easy plan to execute. And I think that Peace are getting really good at doing that. Yeah.
And this is always like the thing that we complimented Peace a lot over the last few weeks. It's like, this is the team where I would say, like, obviously I didn't see that, I don't get to watch the scrims and stuff, but this is the team where I can confidently say their scrim performance is probably just as good as their stage performance. They're willing to pull the trigger even on stage. They feel comfortable on stage, and when you see a team that's able to do that, you know it's going to be a good team. Like, they're going to have good performances. Because the thing is, like, I struggle to see Chiefs doing that. I struggle to see Order doing that. And I struggle to see Pentanet doing that, right? Like, they're not comfortable pulling the trigger. They're not comfortable punishing their opponent 24/7 on stage.
Yeah, and one thing I want to bring up and sort of bring credit to on Peace is their mid-jungle. Because I feel like Appy, especially, is a player who is so underrated. He's like, every team he's on, at least for the last, 2 years, Peace last year and this year, he's just sort of there, and everyone accepts that he's going to play well every game, right? But he never really gets called out as, the carry, right? It's always like, oh, Cheon got this pentakill, or Lisa played really well. But him and Lisa, they're probably the best mid-jungle in the league right now. Like, no cap, they've been playing so well. Appy has been crushing it on mid lane, and their synergy together is just great. I mean, you've played together for 2 years now, right? You've developed that, you know how each other work. And I think that they're just running the map together, and there's no mid-jungle duo that's been playing as well. Like, I'd say Kevin and Kisei are the closest.
I don't even think there's like a duo that played together as long as Lisa and RP right now.
Yeah.
Right. Previously, we had a few. You know, probably you have Puma Beats, for example. They've been playing together for 2 years. But Lisa RP has been the LCO sort of what was that, like the banner thing that was
the
cute.
heartbreak.
But yeah, I mean, like Lisa RP, very long time duo. They obviously have synergy, and like frankly speaking, I don't think they are the best mechanical duo. Like RP and Lisa both individually aren't mechanically sort of at the top, right? Like they're good, but I don't think like there are better players in the league in terms of mechanics. But together, Lisa RP, probably the best duo you can get right now in the LCO.
And they're so stable, right? I think that's something that I value a lot about Peace, and that's why you see the game plan feels so easy, right? Watching the games, it feels like, oh, this game's so easy. It's because they're mid-jungle almost always do exactly what they need to. Like Appy, he always has his wave in a good spot. If he needs to push, he will push so he can get roam. Otherwise, he can just set the wave up for a gank. Like they know exactly what they need to do, and they're executing it really well. So shout out Appy, shout out Lisa, crushing it. Some other players that we want to shout out are the MVP of this week, and we have split votes again. So we're gonna have to sort of settle it with a debate right now. So Calvin, why don't you introduce who you picked for the candidate of MVP?
Now, my MVP pick is probably not someone that people expected, but I gave it to Kiyose. So before that, I was actually debating whether I should give it to Raze or whether I should give it to Changi. Now, Changi obviously had this performance on Ari, but then he also had this performance on Riven and Graves. So I'm just like, not really deserving of the MVP.
He was 1/3 of the MVP.
Yeah, he was 1/3 of the MVP, right? And then Raze, solid performance all around, right? Chiefs got a 3-0, I believe. Yeah, they got a 3-0. But the thing is, Raze had some, like in my opinion, he had some plays where it was very questionable. He miscalculates damage, he misposition, and whilst he was the one that sort of saved the game between Chiefs versus Order. I just feel like Kiyose, like the fact that this guy gapped mid lane 3 games in a row is very impressive to me, and he basically contributed to a lot of Direwolf's success, even if they lose the game.
Yeah, I agree. The reason I sort of differ my prediction, my vote,
Tell me.
I guess, is sort of the strength of schedule, right? So, yes, he gapped mid, right? But when you look at who he played against, let me just bring up the current schedule. So the first game was against Chiefs, and that was the game where they dived the mid tier 2 at 3 minutes, and Gudo died, and Kiyose had the flash. So I don't know if we can call that one a mid gap, because Zoranus just absolutely Janus Smite top. We don't talk about that, okay? Then they played against Gravitas, and then Kanga, right? And I think Gravitas was probably the biggest solo lane gap that we saw. Got multiple solo kills on Daejong, but to be fair, Daejong isn't like a Victor player, right? Like he's not known for playing their champion. Sorry.
Yep. I just don't know. Like, does Kiyose know how to mind control people? Because he is getting winning matchups despite blind picking Syndra.
Yeah, I know. People just pick whatever they want and then just lose the matchup. And then Kanga has Graves into Syndra, which, as I talked about before, is a pretty fucking sad matchup if you're the Graves. So my pick for MVP of the week was Raze, and the reason I say this is because Chiefs went 3-0. They were the only team, I believe, this week to go 3-0. They're now first.
Yep.
And the main reason I want to say it is the Chiefs versus Order game. I think that game, he was one of the big reasons why they were able to stay in it. He found that massive jump onto Puma, essentially solo killing him before the dragon, which I believe would have been the soul spawn.
It would have been a Dragon Soul, I think.
Yeah, so he managed to delay that game, and then obviously the fight at the Nexus where they eventually won the game. I think he played, yes, he made some mistakes in the early game, but I think overall he brought it back quite well. I can't give it to Tally just because he played Veigar all 3 games, and I hate that champion, so my vote's going to be Raze. But I think we can award dual MVPs for this week. So Kiyose and Raze, congratulations.
Well, how about this, Max? Have our viewers comment
Yeah, okay, that's
who
good.
they think the MVP is.
Sure.
All right.
We'll do that.
Either comment below in the YouTube video if you're
Or
listening
on
to
Twitter.
YouTube, or tweet at us.
Yeah.
All right. At that LCO show. Tell me what you guys think. Tell us what you guys think. What you think is the MVP for Week 1 Super Week.
Out of Kyosei or Rays, okay? If you say Rays,
Kyosei.
if you say Rays, you're correct. If you say Kyosei, you're wrong. Anyway, next week, on to next week. We have a huge week, with some really banger games. So there's sort of three that I want to focus on. We've got Order Peace, PGG versus Order, and Peace Chiefs. So, to me, this week is gonna be the defining week for how teams are going to head into the playoffs, right? Because the top of the standings, obviously both 8 and 1, they're quite separated, right? So I don't know if we'll be able to see the likes of Order and PGG vie for that first and second spot. But what I'm really interested about is the third spot, right? Because you've got Order playing Peace. If they win that, it really is going to elevate them because PGG just lost to Peace, right? So that's a win that they can't get. And then PGG Order is probably going to be the biggest game this week because that's going to separate who is coming in as third seed and who's coming in at fourth seed. And we've talked about it heaps on this show, but third and fourth is the difference between upper bracket and lower bracket. So I think this week is going to be absolutely huge on the standings.
Yeah, and I mean, and also the rematch against Peace versus Chiefs. I don't think that matters as much in terms of, the upper bracket, lower bracket thing. But it will determine, who is looking like the best team in LCO right now. And I just can't, I just can't hold to mention the real banger that is Mammoth versus Gravitas.
Wait, to be fair, those games are normally actually pretty good. Those games are normally quite entertaining.
It's actually pretty fun to watch
because they're pretty similar level, right? It's not like one team's huge. The games that are boring to watch are when it's like Gravitas versus like Chiefs or something, and it's just a stomp. But these games are actually quite fun. One thing I do want to talk about with Peace Chiefs is that's probably going to decide who is first and who is second. So who gets the bye?
Yeah, for the rest of the split.
Who gets an extra week off to just relax? Well, obviously not relax, but practice, study the other teams, prepare stuff for playoffs. I wanted to ask you this, Calvin.
Yeah.
Would you rather? Because we talked about this on Order, and I think the players had definitely like some differing views between us. Like, would you rather come in having a bye or playing an extra week? Because I know a lot of players actually would prefer to play the extra week, just as sort of stage practice, best of 5 practice, whatnot.
Yeah. This is a hard one. So, I do think that playing an extra week is the way to go because you're sort of keeping your engine up, like even after postseason, right? Like a lot of the times I do see, like even not just in LCO, but like in other regions, where if team gets a bye first week of playoffs, like they seem a little shaky when they came back, right? Like they have better prepare, like they have better preparation most of the time because they get to see drafts, right? Like a lot of the times it's not really a 3-0 game. You get like 3-1 games, sometimes you get 3-2 games, and teams that they play against had to show like at least 3, at most 5 drafts.
Yeah.
And it gives them a lot of preparation time, but the downside of that is you don't get a lot of game time. And sometimes, player get rusty a little, sometimes players slack off, and sometimes the patch just changed so drastically that players need to readapt, right? So for me, I also agree that, I love playing that one extra game, even though it means that, there's a lot more work for both players and staff alike.
Okay. Yeah, because I think, to speak a bit to that, it's like the power of momentum in playoffs is huge, right?
Yes.
Like if you 3-0 your opponent in the first round, that gives the team so much confidence heading into that second game that they're going to play better, right? Because you've just 3-0, you're feeling hyped, you're feeling pumped, you're feeling ready for playoffs. And the other team, like, yes, they were first seed, but does that matter anymore? You know what I mean? Like, when it's all playoffs, like, you're suddenly just the team playing the team that just 3-0'd, right? And you haven't gotten anything in that playoff so far. So I think there are definitely pros and cons. It just comes down to how that series goes, I guess, in terms of...
Yeah.
Because you're right, if you have to show all your draft, if you have to pick the weird comp that you were trying to save for, the grand final, it can definitely hurt your playoffs. And that's something that... Actually, let's talk about that, because I think that's something that fans don't really get to see. But playoffs
Yeah.
is like a war of attrition, right? Like playoffs is so different to best of ones because you're not going in and being like, okay, we've just got to prep for this draft versus this team, right? You got to be prepared to adapt and play best of 5. You have to play potentially 3 best of 5s, right? To win playoffs, right? Or is it 4?
I think I think the best case scenario is 3.
Yeah, I think best case is 3. Other teams
Yeah.
might have to play 4. So like,
Yeah.
that's potentially 20 games of League of Legends that you have to play and be prepared for. So it's not something that you can go into and just be like, all right, we've got like 2 comps prepared, let's go, whatever. It's a lot more in depth than that.
I mean, we've referenced this a few times, right? Order versus Peace last year. I mean, we literally just came in with one solid draft.
Don't talk
right?
about it.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite traumatic, but like, we really just went into like with.
I remember kissing this after game 2, and then we got 3-0'd, and then we got reverse swept. So it's pretty cursed.
No.
I get sad every time I think about it. I actually, fun fact, I actually rewatch game 1 of that a lot because I really liked how I played Jason that game. Like I one-shot Violet under our tier 2 turret, and then I called for the back door to end the game. I was like, yeah, it's a fucking good game. And they banned Diana Yasuo game 3, and we're like, shit.
Yeah, I mean, they finally figured out, right?
We don't know how to play mid jungle if we don't have Diana Yasuo. So,
yeah, I mean, I mean, the team had different problems back then, but like, what I'm trying to get at is like, teams usually just go into like a best of 5 series with only a couple draft prepared, right? Like, you don't really want to say, all right, we're going to 5-game series, we can potentially go into 5th game. Let's prepare like 6 drafts. That's just not possible, right? Like, one player learning 6 champions and playing it at a 100% level is almost not possible given how like playoffs work, right? Like, because right after this, you're going to play another team, and that's another best of 5, right? And now the other team knows that you know these 5 champions, and they can draft accordingly. And all of a sudden, you have to learn even more champions. So it's just not really realistic, in my opinion, to sort of prepare sort of more than like anything more than like 3 drafts into a team.
Yeah, and then it comes down to adapting, right? Throughout the series, it's like, okay, so you see this really. There's this really annoying synergy that happens, like in our case, with Diana Yasuo. Like, we need to ban that, we need to adapt to that. And, like, bans in playoffs is something that's, like, really, like, cerebral, and, like, you have to get really thinking about it, because you normally come in versus the team, and you have your bans prepared, right? You're like, okay, these are the champions we're going to ban, and then as it goes on, you're like, well, this champion's been really annoying, we just lost to it, can we find a ban for it? And then, if so, what are we dropping the bans for, etc., etc. That's a huge conversation I don't really want to have now. But I just think it's a really interesting aspect of playoffs that you don't see in the regular season.
Well, anyway, we're not playoffs. We're still going into second week of the Super Week. LCO Super Week. Right. So that sort of brings us to the end.
It's a shorter episode. We did it.
It's a shorter episode.
It's not 50 minutes long. Awesome.
How long is it?
40 around. I think it's around 40
around
minutes.
40, right? I'm looking at the time. Yeah. So, I mean, it is a short episode, but I believe we'll still fill in, basically everything. And let us know if there's anything that you want us to cover, if there's any question you want to ask, tweet at us, comment below in the YouTube, and thank you for listening.
And make sure to vote for who your MVP is for this week.
Yes.
Raze. Okay. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, that LCO show on our socials, and we'll see you back here next week. See you guys.